All
Hello,
right,
folks.
welcome back.
All right, we're going to get back into the next session. I hope that was useful. The previous session, it's quite a lot in there, a lot of building blocks, but hopefully we went through enough to give you like lots of ideas. And then we sort of talked about how to critically analyze those ideas. And one of the tools, a very good tool, is called the Lean Canvas Workshop. But before we jump into exactly what it is, one of the things that we notice is, and if you're in entrepreneurship like I have been for a long time, every so often people build products and they spend a lot of time and they spend a lot of effort, and then that product is unsuccessful for numerous reasons. And it's because they've fallen in love with their idea. And in hindsight, there was really little to no realistic chance for it to be successful because there was no market for that product. And in taking the time to evaluate these, it should help you pick your best approach. So, put your best foot forward. And because I want every one of you to be successful, I want every one of you to have, your own startup, your own, whatever your definition of success is, I want you to have it. So going through processes like this is an important step to significantly increase your chance of doing something, of picking the best option. So I just wanted to really highlight that, and the reason why it's super important. All right, let's get into it. The hashtag, which is Startup Weekend Global. So if you love what you're seeing, take a snapshot. If you're watching it on the live stream, do a tweet. I'm at Darren Rogan, at me, hashtag, love to see it. Lean Canvas. All right, so this is the next workshop. What is lean? Lean is the concept of focusing on the value. What is the valuable thing that we need to do, and trying to do smaller steps. Another great example is think of it like if you do one big jump versus lots of small jumps, because you can only go so far. So you want to take smaller steps and understand, am I going the right direction? The Lean Startup book is a great book. I think it was it's a bit old these days, realistically, but it was in a time before they even knew what lean was. There wasn't a term called lean startup. I would recommend everyone to give this book a read. It's a great book, and it does explain. Now, I wouldn't say it's like a how-to guide, but it does give examples of saying what is the most important thing for us to find out, which is what is going to move the needle. How are we going to determine that we are successful? And it shows some examples of that where they've been able to find product market fit by going through a series of steps. So definitely a must read. So this is the lean process as we see it, right? The conceptual process is that you have some sort of ideas. I've got a problem that I want to get solved. I've got an insight that I'm looking for. And then we build something. We build an MVP. That MVP might just be a test. It doesn't have to be a full product. It might just be a marketing campaign, a landing page to verify brands or marketing messages. So it doesn't have to be like a full application. So a product in its own right. And then we measure the success of that, and then understand if we were correct or wrong. One big part is make sure you put those decision points before you start measuring, or you'll retrospectively apply the learnings to be whatever you wanted it to be. And from experience, it's much better to put that at the build stage. You're like, okay, what is the definition of success for this? What does it look like? Let's say it's I want to determine if anyone's interested in this idea. I might do like Google AdWords, for example, on a landing page to see if there's market demand for some product that I'm selling. So at that point, I might be like, do a landing page with put your email address in, and I'll say like I'm going to put a couple $100 into adverts, and I might say where I want at least 100 signups for $100 spend in order for me to justify that I should continue evaluating this, and then running multiple experiences as well. But think about it, is what's the most important thing for you to know, and what are the easiest steps for us to find that out? And that's basically the lean process. All right. So what is the lean canvas? Okay. So the lean canvas is this, which came from the business model canvas, and then we're using it as the lean canvas. It is a way to rationalize your business opportunity and business model. So we take that product, and you may have a product which goes to different customer segments, for example, or slight variations of that product. You might have a B2B play, which is a business to business, or you might have a business to consumer play, a B2C play. And each one of those, I would do a different lean canvas, because the benefits for one may not be the benefits for the other. And then this allows us to have some sort of frame of reference, so that we can take like multiple versions of this, which may be like variations of the idea, it may be completely unrelated ideas, and we can actually have something that allows us to sort of compare apples to apples, as they say, because it's very difficult when I go through this process to understand which ones work or don't work. And you might hit a snag in one where you're like, oh, hold on, we're not going to be able to do this because of something here that you wouldn't necessarily know if you just jumped in and start building your product straight away. So the numbers that you see here on this are generally the order which people fill it out. Okay, so number one is the problem or problem space. Okay, and boredom is a problem. Entertainment is the solution to boredom. Okay. Yeah, and Tinder and all, they're all problems too. So you can think of these things as, what is the problem for the user that I'm trying to solve? And then the number two is, who are my customers? Who are all my types of customers? And then that early adopter section is, right, who are my first set of customers? You know what I mean? Who are the people that are going to use my product to start with? Because as we know, all products may not be fully feature rich at the start, or the first version of the product may not be great, or because your product might take years to build. So we build like a small version one with a smaller customer set, and then we can move through. So trying to understand how those work. Number three is the big bit. Number three, the unique value proposition. This is, what does your idea do? How would I explain that in a clear way? I like to think of it as, what is the tweet that I tell you? So there's also a thing called the rule of threes with pitching, which is like everything is three. So I got 30 seconds, 3 minutes, 6 minutes, 30 minutes, and an hour, and they're your normal interaction times. So your 30 seconds when you're in a lift with someone and they say, what do you do? That's what should be there. Do you know what I mean? Like, we're going to do Uber in a little bit, but like the Uber is, I'm travel, but I'm safer and faster than taxi. Safer, faster, and it was cheaper when it came out. And they're unique value propositions that you'll be able to clearly articulate what we're bringing to market. So I like to think of it as the tweet. Then the solution is really, okay, so how do we solve these problems? What are the main features that we do? So let's say, some of the examples that I articulated before, let's just say that we're going to do that crypto one, and we do token proof. Okay, so I'm just doing this right off the bat, but token proof, which we've seen, the problem is that we want to verify that people have NFTs, but it has a bunch of security risks with interaction with hot wallets of ownership, poison attacks, physically somebody taking your phone off you, or like a bouncer, and then doing a transfer. These are all real risks. So there's the problem. And then the customer segment, we got customer segments of the average person, but really the customer is probably event organizers, NFT projects, conference organizers. Those are the sorts of ones. And the unique value proposition is sort of like a verifiable ownership made easy for in real life scenarios. So I'm sort of haven't pre-thought this one, just to be clear. I'm just throwing it out here, but that sort of, you start to see how we start to fill these in. And then the solution is like, well, how do we do that? Well, they've got a verifier app. They've got a consumer app where you connect your wallets, and it verifies that you have those NFTs, and it creates these QR codes that works with the scanner. So that's sort of like, oh, how do I do that? Well, I need to do user verification. I need to have a verifier. I need to have a mechanism that collects both of these together. And then and then after that, What's my unfair advantage? Well, the unfair advantage at this point with like token proof is that there's nothing really there, and you've got like first mover advantage. You've got a bunch of other stuff, but some of those can be difficult in Web3 compared to Web2, where a lot of the unfair advantage is in having a community and having market dominance. And then we move to cost structures. We move then to revenue streams. So that's money in and money out. Okay, because in order to have like an engine of growth, we need to make sure that we have money flow. So money in is sort of like how will we make money? That might be through initially, it might be through an initial token offering if we're trying to raise capital, but it's really a capital raise. But most of these things you would really want to have some long-term value. Like if I went with a standard NFT community project, revenue streams would be the initial mint, and then it would be secondary sales, and then the third revenue model would be potentially licensing deals and merch. You know what I mean? They would be potentially sort of your revenue streams. Then your cost structure, if we go straight to like an NFT, that would be that you potentially have to pay for an IPFS pinning service, like for your data. You've got artists, you've got other costs being Shopify stores and other sort of understanding how they work. Now, if you look at any business, it will work if the revenue streams are bigger than the cost structure, which means you're net positive. You're bringing more money in than you're spending. But if it goes the other way, that business won't stay around for very long. Now, certain startups and certain businesses, that there's a delay where it does cost more, but there's an inflection point where it then we make more money than it costs, and we might raise capital to get us through that part where the cost structure is there to start with, but the revenue is delayed. But at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we have a comprehension that the revenue, even at a final state, is still going to be larger than the cost. And if it doesn't, then this isn't really a business, because you're going to lose money in it. So it's a very, very important section. And then we have like the key metrics about how do we know it's going to work, and then the channels, which is how do we bring it to market. All right, so this is important. We're going to run through this a couple of times just so you know. Okay. Uber. So we're going to go through the Uber one. Is it? Oh, sorry. So if I go through Uber, for example, we're going to do the let me just check. Okay, path. Yeah. So sorry, I've just done those ones. So there's the customer segments as I was describing. Like, there's your idea right now, the ones that are in blue, because I've got an idea. I sort of have an idea of what I want to build. It means I sort of understand the problem, that because I'm bringing this, solution, unique product. The customer segment. So, some of mine might be NFT projects. It may be, DeFi, it might be wallet, it might just be retail. And then those channels is like, how do I get discovered? How do I sell that? That might be direct, that might be influencers, that might be some other stuff. But you should be able to, from an idea stage, sit down at this point and sort of say like, okay, what is this? And then, as I was saying, this key metrics to understand how your business is actually going. And make sure that that you can understand how that would impact your cost and revenue structures. In most tech startups, your costs at the start are high, but your revenue increases over time. Web3 is a little different because we normally have large liquidity injection when we have things like mints or token offerings where we sell a bunch of tokens and we have revenue. And then from there, you could potentially stake some of that or some other stuff. But normally we need an ongoing revenue source for long-term success. Pardon me. This is well Canva. All right, so lean canvas is structuring yourself as a startup. The lean model canvas is structuring yourself as a business. Okay, so I think this is very interesting. We're doing the lean canvas, and the previous one was about the product. Okay, so we have the idea about what are we going to build, what is the product we're going to take to market, and then this lean canvas helps us figure out what is the business that goes around this product that actually makes this product successful. Okay, and you need both. Realistically, you need a product and you need a business around it in order to sustain itself. Structuring yourself as a business. Okay, let me just double check this. So as you can see, we have to the left, we have the product, and to the right, we have the market. So we have a good comprehension of both, but you can really start to see the multifaceted stuff that's going in here that allows us to potentially do numerous canvases with those different shortlisted ideas and variations of those. They may even be, you know, I've done ones where I've got the same product, but we're deciding on where to launch. So are we going to launch in like Australia? Are we going to launch into the US? Are we going to launch into Singapore? Or where are we going to launch? Because a lot of that is about the market. And then at that point, our product was pretty similar from you know, one to the other, but we were able to have different markets to help understand the opportunity, to help us decide which market to enter first. Okay. A business model describes the rationale of how an organization creates, delivers, and captures value. That's great. In a startup, I love the one that says, you know, you jump out of a plane and you figure out your business model before you hit the ground. Okay. So you either make a parachute or you have no company. And what we're trying to do is help you through this process of figure out a lot more before you jump out of the plane and you know, quit your job or you take anything else, which is a large change. At this point, we can sort of de-risk that choice significantly. So yeah, I went through the building blocks pretty quickly, but they are here as well, which is that customer segments. You know, your customer can be segmented in lots of different ways. It very much depends on the type of thing that we're doing. But you know yourself that when you bring something to market, is it a Web 2 thing? Is it a niche? Is it like a music-centric thing? So then our customer segments are all sort of music related. The value proposition, that's, as I mentioned before, the unique thing that we're doing. What is the point of this? What are we doing? Because like I remember people doing some DAOs and it was capturing lots of money. And they're like, collecting all this money, this DAO's doing really well. And I'm like, and if you like, so what? You know, like the collection of assets into a DAO is not a value proposition. It just is. It just happens. So yes, you've created a mechanism for you to collect this capital, but what you haven't done is figured out like a value proposition to do anything with this capital. So you're very good at marketing, but realistically, this thing's probably going to fizzle out because once you know this capital runs out or it gets used, there's no real value there. So it's very important to think about the short term and the intermediate to long term when you're looking at like a business success versus can I do like a successful token launch? Because lots of people do successful token launches with not a great value proposition, and then that product sort of dies in 6 months or whatever and disappears, and the whole team go back to something else. We don't want that to happen to you. We want you to build stuff that will be sustaining long term and add a lot of value, which is why we're harping on about some of this stuff. All right, channels. Channels are super important. If you have the best product in the world and no one sees it, then it's valueless. Okay. And I have worked on some products and some services that have been fantastic, but the marketing meant that very few people came through the door. Everyone who came through was delighted, but the business still died because we did not have the distribution and discovery channels. So we got just so you know, we got like commented on how good the product was. We got reviews in magazines, but it still died because those channels are super important. Understanding, are you going to do direct sales? Are you going to do partnership sales? Are you a white labeled product? Are you front of house where people are, you know, using you? These are the sorts of things we need to think about. But one point I would say for general advice is do not put the success of your startup, your venture, completely in the hands of others. Okay, so you want some control over some of that channels. A lot of times I see people just outsource all of their sales to other people, but that person isn't as passionate in making your business successful as you will be. And that will be probably a collection of other sales that they can do. And sometimes these sales guys will only sell the thing that gives them the most kickbacks. So be aware that the channels of go-to-market continues from that customer segment and how we connect with those and how we work them. In Web3, it's difficult because a lot of times with the wallet, we have like an interaction where they use us, but we don't really connect with them in the same way or the same identity like we have done in the web 2, where you've got like an email address and you're sending marketing and so forth. So it is interesting how we do those, but we start to see other mechanisms. As I mentioned, I've got some soulbound tokens, for example, from Killer Bears, which is an NFT project, and that it is then used as part of that customer relationship stuff. So that's an interesting thing there. The revenue streams, super important. How do you make money? How do you pay for things? Like the burn rate may be different. We may not have huge costs, but servers still need to be bought. Domain names still need to be paid for. People's time need to be paid. Like we all need to eat at the end of the day. So we want to make sure we have some sort of revenue, and ideally something that has some mechanism for sustainable revenue, and we don't have a big blip of revenue and then with just no more revenue from then on in. So we really need to understand, that big blip needs to take us to another stage where we get more revenue. I like to think of it as some of those time trial games where you need to figure out, right, well, I've hit the timer. I've got 30 seconds to get to the next timer. So, you need to make sure you've got future things or you'll just run out of steam. All right, key resources. Key resources, a lot of the times are people in this space because previously wasn't available. And what you're doing is you're using Web3 Rails or you're using fractional ownership, for example. There's a ton of intellectual property and value which could be brought to the market that people might want a piece of, but realistically is not available because, as I mentioned earlier, there's a thing called like token price gating. So like fractionalized shares is a great example. I think Warren Buffett's company, and he's like 3,000 or 30,000 for one of their shares. So what that means is like a normal person can't get those benefits. So there's some things to think about. Key activities are super important. Key resources are generally going to be your people at this point, but what expertise do you need to pull this off? And relationships as well. Key activities is making sure that you understand what's happening, that you are focusing on the right parts of your business for things to work. Because I've worked with people in the past and they've shown me like social media numbers, and social media numbers are great, don't get me wrong, but they've spent all the time in non-key activities. So how do I measure the success and progress of this business? What is the heartbeat? How do I know these growths? What are the numbers we need to look? Because if you're managing those numbers from the start, you're going to have a significantly higher chance than just not paying attention to them. Key partnerships, super important. Things like Polygon, other people in the space can offer credibility. I know the Polygon ID conversation's on a little bit. I've launched a bunch of stuff on Polygon myself, but it's sort of like, who do I need to work with? And especially when you like money Legos or we're building on top of other assets, then, there could be a partnership there with Uniswap, for example, if I'm building something on top of their AMM, or I'm going to go over to Polygon and pick our Arbitrum or Optimism and like bring a product that integrates with some others and try to use them as key partnerships in sales, because I'm adding value to their product as I use that product in another value chain, which then expands the value of them, and then that could be potentially useful as key partnerships. But it could be, we're selling tools to lawyers or accountants or some other industry, so it doesn't have to be Web3 people. It could be standard Web2 at the end of the day, because Web3 is just a technology that's going to eat everything at the same time. And cost structure. One of the big things about cost structure in Web3 is the inversion of costs, because today I run a server in AWS and you don't pay to do an interaction. I pay to do the interaction for you. So I've got these hardware costs and running costs. So that still exists with like your web front end, but the cost, server cost, interaction cost, that sort of gets pushed out to the Ethereum network, for example, which can remove from you. But launching a project in a market can be expensive. So what is the ongoing cost? How many people do we think we would need? And that will give you a good idea of whether or not this should be done. Okay, this is a great visualization of the sections as we were describing before. As you can see, you got your key activities, you got your costs, your key resources, and your key partners on the left. And then on the right, you've really got, the market stuff, like who do I need to work with? How do I get to the customers? What are the channels to get stuff to? And then how do I make money? That's it. Went through a little bit more detail. I've actually went through this, but you can see in here, from cost structures, it actually has some good examples in here. And this is quite an in-depth slides. I don't want to read this one, but I believe, Ben, correct me if I'm wrong here, but all of these slides are going to be available. This is actually being live streamed on YouTube as well, so you can always go back and check this. And I believe these slides are going to be made available to everybody. But yeah, it's really useful because it actually breaks down some of these categories and gives you a bit more information about like key resources, types of resources, one being financial and then one being human. You know what I mean? Like if I'm trying to do, a type of thing that requires AI, then I need someone who can do AI, as a human resource, and someone who's got those skills. But I might need financials because I might say, right, I'm gonna do a fractionalized ownership of this asset, but I need the money to buy the asset in the first place before I can fractionalize it to move forward. So that might be, a financial key resource. Anyway, I'll leave that to read yourselves. Customer segments. The customer segments is one of the most important parts of understanding your marketing, because in previous generations we had mainstream media with just one media channel, and you put your advert on primetime TV and it was seen by the majority of people. Those days don't exist anymore. Everyone is fragmented into their own little bubbles, and we need to understand where we need to go to get in front of our types of customers. Who are the best customers, or who are the first customers, or the early adopter customers? There's like a Venn diagram, which is like circles over the top of each other that overlap, where we have, the product that we have today, and then at some point you've got all the customers we want, and there's an overlap between what we currently have, V1, and the customer base who would be interested in doing that. And that's the sort of thing where we really want to, focus on that, and then that can derive potentially the execution strategy to make sure that we can not like build feature 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but say, right, we're going to launch to customer segment 1. What are the features that person needs to receive the value? And then that is the delivery set that we do in our execution sprints, so that we can actually bring value to a customer segment. And we may only focus on one customer segment, which means like a feature or a function, for example, may not have all of the functionality that we may want built, because that customer segment doesn't care about that just yet. You know what I mean? Like a great example of this is if your customer is a small to medium business, they probably don't need teams and roles and all this sort of, levels of authorization of individuals, because it's normally just going to be an owner executor, which means, management layers and auditing and all that sort of stuff is not valuable for them at that point. But later in a customer segment, I'm going after an enterprise software. Let's say I'm a supply chain company and I'm using the blockchain to manage your assets around. At that point, we may start to have like visibility. We might start want to have a lot more roles. So that customer segment will determine what is required for those. Okay, the value proposition, as we were saying, that is what are we trying to do. Now, the ideation is very much around that problem space. And then the solution, the definition of the top level solution, the value that we're bringing in, that is the value proposition. That is the tweet, that is the pitch, and we need to clearly understand it, and also think about it to be explained. Because I worked at an accelerator program, and I had some professors doing a startup, and he is actually the renowned person in the world on gut microbiomes and speaks all over the world. Super clever guy, but too correct. His value proposition was not clearly understandable by other people. Okay, so really try not to be too complex or too wordy. The reality is your value proposition needs to resonate with the other people, so they understand that what you're trying to do. Because if I give you a complex value proposition and you can't explain to someone else what I do, then I have failed here. Because I need to be able to explain it to you, that you can explain it to someone else, and they can come talk to me, and it logically makes sense. It doesn't have to be technically accurate, but it logically needs to be to make sense. And the channels, as we were describing, most channels is very much about how you get, your customers. How do you get people into your product? How do you get people into your primary funnel? That could be, partners with, let's say a partner with a wallet, for example. That could be, that could be direct marketing. That could be podcasts. That could be, lots and lots of things. You could be in marketplaces. You get listed on like the Optimism website because you're launching on Optimism, for example. There's just lots of different ways. But as I mentioned earlier, just make sure that you don't just partner with a bunch of other companies for them to do your sales, because you put the life of your business in someone else's hands. So I'm a big believer of always having one of your own channels that you own start to finish, and then potentially partner with other people to get as many people into the funnel of your business as possible, are satisfied, that they continue to be your customer, be a customer advocate. And in Web3, one of the things that we really do is we move you from being a supporter to be a customer, to be a community member, to be an ambassador of our products. Okay, so this customer relationships, you see it massively in the Web3 space as people feel real ownership of it. And if we're able to use tokens, for example, to create that very positive relationship, we might have a customer for life, which is an important thing. If you've got a cost of acquisition, which is how much it costs me to get this customer through different channels, then I want to make sure that I can hold on to you as long as possible, because it's cheaper to hold on to you than it is to bring new people in. Plus, everyone wants good reviews. Okay, key activities. What is it that must happen? What is it that we must do in order for this to work? Now, if you miss a key activity, think of it like a chain. You're going to take a link out of that core chain and it's not going to work. So what are the chain of things that we need to do in order for this to work? Because with those key activities, we can start to record the progress of those and understand what we need to do, especially when we're starting to evaluate potentially one option against another option. You might find that one option has significantly less key activities to do and has a similar outcome of revenue. So then why am I going to work harder on option A when option B has the same value for less effort? Okay. And we don't necessarily know this off the top of our head. And that's why writing it down, especially because there's normally activity spread across multiple people. So then you're capturing all of the work, because some work is like an iceberg where you only see the top of the work, and there's lots and lots and lots that you may not understand because it's outside of your knowledge, for example. So you want to make sure that you bring your BD guy, your technical executor is in to understand what needs to be done. So yeah, I think that I've harped on that one enough. The key resources, a lot of times that's people, you know what I mean? Like, who do I need? And for us, it's normally people. Do I need a Solidity developer? I may not. I may use something like Third Eye, which is like an abstraction above. And so it's like standard Web 2 tools, and the Web 3 stuff's hidden. Or, am I doing a bunch of visual stuff? So I need designers, or am I trying to sell to a certain class of people? Do I need a doctor? Do I need someone with a medical background, or someone else who's in the industry for us? Or, let's say, for example, if I'm going to launch a product and I'm trying to do like a token launch and all that sort of stuff, I might need capital to bring to market in order to do it. Not necessarily to pay for my time, but I might, for example, need to fund liquidity pools. I might need to create an AMM in Uniswap, or wherever you want it to be, in order as part of your release. So these are financial resources that you need, and in some of the scenarios that I've seen, if you don't have enough financial resources, you're almost like always on the back foot and unlikely to be successful. But money isn't everything, folks. Plenty of things have been built pretty cheaply and then continue to grow. And a lot of startup ideas can come out of these sorts of things, and might take a little while for maturation and for it to take advantage of. But primarily, it's going to be people for us. Uh, Key partnerships. Okay, so these are your suppliers, really, and partners. So people like Polygon, people like wallet suppliers. So there's a mobile wallet called Rainbow, which is on the iOS store, and I really like. I primarily use MetaMask for Ethereum, but I do like that wallet because it has like all the DeFi options like right in the app. So they, for example, could be a key partnership and a channel around discovery. Your key partnerships could be like, let's say we're doing fulfillment. Like I had an idea to do customizable books and then use NFTs as the as some of the assets. So I don't think I'm going to do this, but let's say I wanted to do, and there's a big need for this in kids with learning difficulties where they experience things for the first time, causing them a lot of anxiety and they act out, for example. So if you're able to normalize this scenario before they arrive there. So I was thinking like going to the dentist, getting an injection, and then you're able to take like your kids and their name and so forth. So you might do something where you sell the NFT and you're able to customize the character, for example, like, and then you mint that, and then that's the redeemable, and then they burn that, and that then gets that character being the name and the variation of the assets that you picked, that then gets put into the generated story, and then we print out a physical book and send it to someone. Now I think like that's a great idea. There may be someone doing this, just to be clear, but I'm not aware. But that's one there where we got a key partnerships, and those partnerships would be our book publishers, who's actually going to do the physical prints of the books and deliveries. So who's our printer, for example. So once we move outside the Web3, which our primary partners are potentially exchanges and alchemies and those sorts of stuff, to the real world, we start to get more and more businesses involved. If you're creating a layered business that's sitting on top of other primitives, then those primitives may be key partnerships as well, because the more that you integrate with other people, there's like an interaction point there. So if they're coming out with a V2 or a V3 or they're making modifications, you want to know that, so you want to sort of connect with those. Okay, and those key partnerships could also be like VC firms, businesses. If I'm trying to secure intellectual property, but it's sort of like, who are the people outside the R team? So when I look at the key resources, that's like inside my team, and I look at the key partnerships outside my team, the BD stuff to get done. Okay, and then cost structure, how much are things going to cost? In this sort of stuff, a lot of it is primarily going to do to resourcing, but we have things like, do we need a security audit? How much is the security audit going to cost? How much are the resources for the people going to cost? How much marketing do we need? And some of those can be beneficial to understand if this is a high capital outlay thing or it's a low capital outlay thing. So let's say I'm going to do a members club, or then it's a high cost because I need to create, I need to fit out a building, for example, or I need to buy hardware, or some things like that. So it's very important, when you move away from the idea, it's very important to really comprehend how much it's going to cost, because that's the core function here. We need to bring more in than we spend. Okay, so here's Netflix, which I mentioned a little bit before, and we'll go through that pretty quickly. But as you can see, if we start at the value proposition for Netflix, which that's super convenient. And that's because it was delivered straight to your house. You didn't have to go to a physical store. You've got no late fees, so that was fully, unique. Like I think Blockbuster and those video stores ended up surviving on those revenues of late deliveries. The suggestion library and that large library, that was an innovation that they brought in, and they took what you might be seen as a negative to be, well, I don't have 10,000 of the most recent movie, because that's what Blockbuster did. Their competition had a business strategy that said, we're going to have the newest releases and we're going to have lots of that newest release, so you're going to come to us for that. And Netflix were like, well, we're not necessarily going to be able to do that because we're not going to be able to send it out to the same amount, because we have like one store for everybody rather than one store for each person. So they look at that with a large library and that suggestion engine. So I really like that. It's like an ideation about, well, how can we turn this negative into a positive? So they're the value propositions. And this is very much, like early days. So the customer segments were US households. Unfortunately, it was only US for a long time. It no longer is. People who are interested in film buffs, families, mainstream, and moviegoers. Look, I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, we used to do go to the video store and pick up like a VCR of a movie, like a family movie, and get some stuff and then bring it back. So that family stuff, that makes a lot of sense. And these customer segments, so that really then would be like. So once we go from there, we look at the customer relationships. As well, you'll see that Netflix was very much self-service, and the reason I went there, probably jumping around a little bit different, is the cost structure again is very important here, because being a self-service means that cost is reduced again, and we in the cost structure, we've got facilities and staff, so that automation really gives us a benefit in the market of staffing, and I believe this is probably one of the spots for Web3 in particular, where these facilities of using a blockchain means that we don't necessarily have to pay outlandish costs to AWS for stuff. And the staffing that would normally be done by individuals can now be digitized and put on the blockchain. So that I think is a very common thing, okay? So in that cost structure. And if you look at the key activities, these are very important for the success of the business, which is the DVD operations. This needs to be smooth. We need to make sure the DVDs are coming out, they're coming in. The fact they were able to put them in actual standard envelopes meant, because they came out with a new box, like an envelope box as well. So these meant that they had an additional reduction in price of sending. But that DVD operations of getting the DVDs, marking them in, marking them out, that's super important for the success of the business. Because if that's not great, then your assets are not working for you, because you always want your assets to generally be out working. You don't want them sitting in the back. You don't want them just being processed. Do you know what I mean? Because that's dead time for your asset. Bit like airplanes, they always want them in the air. They don't want them sitting in the back and people getting stuff off and on. So that operations is massively important, and the purchasing. And the algorithm development. So if you've got a limited, you still see this in Netflix. You've got a library, or a huge library, or a limited library. Doing those sort of customizations to individuals and understanding their preferences. That's important. That's another benefit that isn't available in the real world. But at the same time, it's still difficult for our competitors at this point. So the key partners, as we know, is the Postal Service, because we are very much reliant on them to send and receive, and we want to get like bulk pricing down as much as possible. And then the TV and film studio, that's our raw product that we're selling. Okay, that is the tangible asset that we're the middleman, basically getting those assets, being those content of the DVDs, and then we're reliant on that other key partner, which is the service. Now, none of them are employees, which is why they're in that key partner sector and not in the key resources. Okay. Okay, so I think we've sort of covered this one enough, and the revenue for that was subscription and envelopes, monthly subscriptions. Okay, and then normally I might also do some spreadsheeting if I'm trying to figure out something to be like, okay, well, from a revenue perspective, if it's monthly, how many customers do we think we're going to get, and what would be the revenue of those types of customers, to also qualify sort of the amount of revenue rather than just saying monthly. But anyway, let's keep going. The big difference for them of it being a monthly revenue stream was that it was a SaaS business. So they had more of a guaranteed income rather than the pay per usage model of like a Blockbuster or whatever. So they were able to then have an understanding of how many people are going to come in and be able to be like yearly discounts for membership to then have guaranteed income coming in versus the high risk of income per sale. So that's where you can see SaaS businesses have sort of taken over significantly because of that benefit. All right, questions you should ask your team when understanding your value proposition. The engineering question: can you create breakthrough technology instead of incremental improvements? I like to think of that in Web3 as, can I rethink this from first principles with the new building blocks that we have? Because there's already a solution in place, or sort of a solution, but it doesn't have the technology options that we were discussed. It doesn't have a soulbound token, doesn't have the ability to potentially do airdrops, to get people to do certain behavior. There's no mechanism in some of these things to say, right, well, if let's say we're going to do a Netflixy sort of thing, well, you might be a movie reviewer, and from there that we sort of pull that in to try to be more community orientated or some stuff. But the engineering is, can I use these new Web3 building blocks to do something which is significantly different? Because a minor improvement, an incremental improvement, is normally not enough to get people to make a move. So there's a great book by Peter Thiel called Zero to One. And in it, he's the founder of PayPal and a bunch of other stuff. So he did that with Elon Musk. He articulates that you need a stepped improvement to get people to change, okay? Because if it's only a minor improvement, I'm probably just not going to get off my butt to go do it. And this engineering question is very apt for us because we have so many new tools and new tools coming as well, that we can do stuff that wasn't possible before. All right, the timing question. Is now the right time to start your particular business? The bear market is a great time to start the business because it's significantly easier to get your key resources. If you need to scale a team, you need to hire developers. In the middle of a bull market, you cannot get a developer, and they'll get poached on you. Your resources get poached. It becomes very competitive. So in the bottom of the bear market, some of these things become easier and some of them become a little more difficult. It is harder to get capital, just to be clear, but the reality is that you've got a higher chance of success because you're already at the bottom. Then we have to look at this from a business opportunity perspective, not just the Web3, but because it may just be using Web3. It may not be an internal Web3 business, not focusing on internal assets. We may just be using those crypto rails. And then there might be things in those businesses. Like the reality with a recession means that people are, switching, or they're looking to downgrade, or they may potentially be interested in taking optimization tools or blockchain or products that they previously were just throwing bodies at. Now they're actually interested in doing cost reduction tasks. The monopoly question. Are you starting with a big share of a small market? Monopolies are great for the companies, and it's okay to start in a small market if there's expansions into other markets, but you do need to really understand that, being the king of your street it doesn't matter. So, if it is a very small area and you can take it, then that's all well and good, but is that the final size and value proposition that you're going to do? Or is that just a niche and you're going to do another niche and another niche and another niche, and then you want to be the first person? If you're the primary, when and if you get to be the primary supplier in a sector, you're front of mind. Think about it. People say they Google it. They don't say they Bing it. But you never know, in a couple of years with OpenAI and Bing, people might say, just Bing that. And that's the sort of thing where if you're able to become that monopoly, you almost sort of can combine some of the marketing and discovery. But you still need to be careful around the size of things. They may not be in the team, but your uncle or so, you might know somebody from school or uni or down the street that may be there. But as I said before, if you're going to be telling me you're going to be doing like an art gallery thing, then I expect, potentially to have someone who knows something about art or involved in the business, involved in the team. It's very difficult for you external to a business or an industry to really understand what those needs and wants are. Plus, there are technology choices. If you say I'm going to do like a game, for example, like a AAA game, and you don't have any game developers, then, that's not going to work, and so forth and so forth. All right, the distribution question. As I articulated before, how do I actually get this product in people's hands? What is the discovery model? How do I give this out? Now, tokens and token drops have been a very common mechanism for distribution and discovery. They are potentially used as mechanisms to get people to come try your product out, because you're potentially giving them a free token, or they can earn a token, or they can take, and that is like an incentive mechanism. It's just one example, but other distributions could be, as I mentioned before, the Rainbow wallet, some some other mechanisms through there as well. But if we're doing just using for vets, and I'm bringing like a vet, or I'm going after a system for breeders. Like I have a French bulldog, and they have trust systems around knowing their pedigrees. So if I could do a system that basically was a blockchain system of an NFT of a breed, and I could record all of the its parents and who his parents are, because it's quite important for genetics that you don't mix ones in relationships. So all of that could be, a Web3 tool at the end of it. It could be verifiable. Like I've thought about building that, but I just haven't had time. But the distribution for that would not be Web3. Do you know what I mean? It just sits on Web3. The distribution for that would be normal Web2 stuff. So how do we get to breeders, dog shows, all that sort of stuff is important. The durability, that's I went through this quite a few times. The fact that you need something that's more than just a token launch and a product that fizzles out. In blockchains, a lot of times it's market dominance. It's bringing something to market and getting a community around you that really is that separate, that sort of defensive and durability. But if you've got a strategy of solving a problem for a sector, then you will evolve with the technology evolutions, because we know the blockchain is going to continue to change. We know we've got we've got layer 2s, we're going to have modular blockchains, we're going to have zero knowledge proofs, we're going to have significantly more and different stuff. So we need to understand about the problem space that we're going to do, and then I find that's much better in that durability. Okay, and then we have like the secret questions, like have you identified a unique, like what can we see that no one else sees? And I think that comes very much into that value proposition. Okay, I'm going to jump through prototyping super quick because this might be useful, but that's sort of the main sessions of those. So prototyping is very useful. Show, don't tell, especially in this sort of program. I prototype a lot of stuff. I've even got a deal with the National Rugby League in Australia for a product that didn't exist. It was just Figma. Okay, because it was just prototyping, and then they loved it, and then we agreed some modifications, and through that we actually built the product and launched it with them. Paper, I love paper. You've got Proof Pop from Marla, which is prototype on paper. You can just draw. If you can draw with a pen, you can draw out an app. You can take pictures and you can connect those things together. Then you can come to and that's Marvel here. This is this proof on prototype on paper. And then you can come to have better versions of those. Like I use InDesign as well, or InVision to do those as well. Figma is another very popular one that we use as well. But it doesn't matter on the tool. It just means that, you can do that. There's no one stopping you. You would be able to deliver this and just draw and connect it together. Okay, and if anyone doesn't know how to use it, I think I have a video that I did. If anyone wants it, I could probably give a link to how to do prototype on paper, and I literally do it and go through the steps. Okay, the personas. So who's it for? Trying to understand who they are, and being like, middle-aged Martha, you know what I mean? Young mom Sally, these try to encapsulate stuff so that am I building stuff for DGen Dave, or am I building stuff for Hodler Harry? Do you know what I mean? Like Hodler Harry does not care about the day-to-day movements, but Trader Trev is on the charts all the time, and DGen Dave just wants to, ape in and basically. So those people want different things, and these personas can help in understanding those market segments, as well as sort of prototyping the products. User flows, and then wireframes. Okay, so I'm just trying to go through this really quickly. Validation, prototypes, and operations. You can see here, you got Canva, logo designs, Midjourney, AI tools, get in there. They're doing great. So I've done a bunch of stuff using Midjourney, Stable Diffusion now, as well as Canva. Google Surveys is a great way of collecting information. I also use Typeform for that sometimes as well, without the payments. LaunchRock is good. That's like landing pages at the end of the day. You might just have someone on the team that's able to do that for you. But you can also just use like a Typeform and then send people straight to the Typeform from like a link or a URL. It doesn't have to have its own landing page, just, Google Sheets is very beneficial. Airtable, Zapier, and Cliff. I haven't actually used Cliff myself. Okay, and then InVision is another very popular app. You can also go to things to like look at other variations. Like there are a ton of breakdowns or redesigns on like Behance. You can have a look for inspiration and the like. And then we talk to the minimum viable product. The problem with the minimal viable product is understanding what is the viable part. Okay, and that's the entrepreneur needs to decide that. That's not necessarily a prototype. That's like what people will actually use, not what you decided to build. Okay, so we learn a lot more from letting people use products than asking people what they want. So yeah, we need the quicker you get it into people's hands, the quicker we get feedback. I also use tools like Inspectlet where I watch people using like Web2 tools, or I'll put a venting on, so I have a comprehension of how people are using my application. Because I want to build a better version. If there's a clunky bit in it, I want to remove that so it's as easy for them as possible. All right, and then we launch at the end of the day. Landing pages, blogs, you can use a Medium. Concierge is very important. Don't if you don't build it, you tell them it's a premium feature, and you're just going to get on the phone. Hi, I'm the CEO. We want to concierge you to make sure you've got a great experience. You know what that means? I haven't built it yet. But so these are little hacks that we can use to do the run. And that concept of the Wizard of Oz is the perception of being big. I'm here, and we've got theme parks here where I am. I use the movie world. It's a theme park. I walk down, and there's walls of buildings, okay? But they're not real buildings. They're just a facade because they don't add any value. Because they're just as props to build the whole theme and the things in the middle. Think of it like that. We don't have to build everything. We can actually, have manual parts, and we can have bits that are not decentralized yet, or bits we haven't built yet, because you're not going to need them. Like I launched a product without a password reset, and it was there for 3 weeks without a password reset until somebody raised the ticket saying they couldn't reset their password. And then I actually ended up going ahead and doing it. And it was just because we had time slots, and I'm like, that can be delayed. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't that it was hard to do. It was just, what is the order of priority of the most important things to hit this event that we were going to? And password reset is actually not a big deal. You know what I mean? And that's what we're saying about like the aspiration of make it till you fake it. It is good, but at the same time, it's a little harder in Web3 with the immutability of smart contracts. So what I like to do is think of your solution as types of modules and Legos, because we can start to build these bits of Legos, and then we can replace an individual piece of a Lego, but it can be difficult to get people to move liquidity from one tool to another. So having abstractions and architecting your products differently can solve a lot of problems there in the future. So that is it for me. I don't really have time to go through these MVPs, but you can see some of these are shit. There's Facebook, there's Airbnb. You need to compare yourself to the initial version of a product with similar resourcing, not a multi-billion-dollar company. And that is it from me. I am Darren Rogan. And if you've got any questions, I am eating into the next person's time. But okay, hi Darren. How can we use the lean canvas? We used to plan and execute community building and engagement strategies for Web3. You could take that lean canvas and say, well, so you think about community building and engagement strategies. I would have potentially multiple variations of how I want to do that. And I would do a lean canvas for every one of those larger different macro ones and say, right, well, let's say we're not going to do Discord because people are over Discord, and we're going to try to use Twitter communities, or we're going to use, a different service. Or I'm going to, go to Tezos and try to connect with the Tezos community because that's where I want to launch. Now, those community building and those engagement strategies would sort of be pulled around there, because you can look at that lean business canvas as a business unit and think of yourself as like an internal customer and say, right, well, I'm the marketer. So my product, my value proposition is this, and I need these things, and I need to do those other things. And to do this strategy, let's say it's a Twitter strategy, then I need, my key partner should use this. But if I'm going to go to Instagram or I'm going to go somewhere else, then those people or those key partners, for example, are irrelevant if I'm going to like switch a complete different network or even a different location. Because as we know, influencers only have an area of influence. And the other bit about engagement strategies, a lot of that is about there's a massive difference between influencers and understanding the value of them. Like I've had like VIP sports personalities. Some of the biggest names do nothing. They're just what we call lighthouse customers. So they attract attention because you know who they are, but they're not actually necessarily that good at building. So you have to like build around them. And then we may have like smaller tier personalities. You're much more engaged, but may not have the same original pool. So that would be how I would sort of try to use that lean canvas to look at those marketing strategies. Hopefully that answers your question. I don't see any other questions on the lean business canvas. There was a lot there, folks. I know I try to jam in ideation, building tools, lean business canvas, and then some prototyping. But I really hope that we've given you the tools to allow you to have a better way of collecting those ideas, sorting through those, and now critically analyzing the business around those products. So that's it for me. You find me on Twitter at Darren Rogan, DarrenRogan. And I have very much enjoyed spending my time with you, my Saturday, and I look forward to subsequent Saturdays as well.
Awesome.
I'll pass it.
Thank you so much, Darren. It's really very informative 2 hours. So thank you so much for that.